Hello, welcome to Pixel and Grain, and today, as the title would suggest, we're going to be 3D printing a panoramic back for a large format camera. But before we get started, I want to just kind of preface why I'm doing this, and sort of like the reasons why a panoramic back or a panoramic ratio is just so different to normal stills photography. Now, when we talk about stills photography, there are a lot of different cameras and a lot of different ways to shoot and a lot of different ways in which the size of the image that we can produce. The most common by far is what's known as a 2:3 ratio. And that is what you'll find in every kind of, I guess, commercially available full frame camera, we call it. And this is because it has a 2:3 ratio. And note I'm saying ratio. We're not talking about the actual sensor size or the bit of film. We're talking about the relation of the height of the frame to the width of the frame. And the 2:3 ratio is just by far the most common. You'll find it in a full frame digital camera. You'll find it in a crop sensor APS-C digital camera. You'll find it in an old Olympus pen half frame camera. These are all 2:3 ratios. Again, same as the full frame digital SLR. For 2:3 in the back of this 35mm film camera, and even up to this crazy big film camera. This is a Fujifilm 6x9. If we have a look at the back, you can see just how big that negative is compared to a full frame negative. But we have to remember, once you print this, once you scan it in, the ratio is exactly the same, and the only way that you can tell the difference is by probably the resolution, and on a film camera it'll be the how fine the grain is. But with film photography, we are so blessed by so many formats of film. Unlike digital, which is shot primarily in this 2:3 ratio, with film we have just so much more room to play with, because rather than building a sensor, which is always going to be used for that exact ratio, with film, we just close it's known as a gate, which is the way in which we kind of imprint the image onto the film. So we have things like this. This is a 1:1 ratio camera, or a square. And this is a medium format, 6:6. But that's not to say that you can't get a 1:1 ratio camera in 35mm, like this little toy Diana Mini. That's also a 1:1 ratio. We then have this 645 medium format camera. Again, uses the same film as the 6:6 and the 6:9, but this time we're shooting a 4:3 ratio. And then we can even go kind of crazy high, and we're talking about large format photography, where we're then shooting 5:4 inch film, which, as you would expect, has a 5:4 ratio. Now, this is like a lot of numbers and stuff, right? But what I'm trying to get at is, as a stills photographer, we have a lot to choose from. So we can really express ourselves with the frame by choosing the format and choosing the orientation. Now, why am I saying all this? It's a really long way of getting around of saying, when we think about ratios for film, as in film photography, like stills photography, it's completely different to video, to cinema. And when I think about cinema, you're thinking about probably the screen you're watching right now, which is a 16:9, probably. It's the same ratio as your phone. It's the same basically as every computer screen nowadays, and it's the same as basically every TV. The 16:9 has become the absolute standard. But a lot of films aren't shot on 16:9 ratio. A lot of films will be shot on, I've got some information up here, a 1.85:1 ratio. And then we have the 2.35:1 CinemaScope ratio. Now, these ratios, to me, they don't stick with me because I'm a stills photographer. But since starting YouTube, or I should say since before starting YouTube, I've become borderline obsessed with trying to frame things up in more of a cinematic kind of frame. With photography, stills photography, we tend to stick to frames that are closer to being square, right? But with cinema, I mean, look at what is it called? A 2.35:1 ratio. I'll put it on the screen now. I'll crop down to it. This is now a crazy long, thin ratio. This is a really odd frame for a stills photographer to want to use. And unlike stills photography, in cinema, we can't just rotate the frame by 90 degrees midway through a film. I mean, there's maybe an argument nowadays that there are more video-based content on vertical 16:9 screens, a bit like, I don't know, I guess short-form content and stuff like that. But, you know, for cinema, for films, when you go to the pictures and you actually see a film, you know, they tend to choose a ratio and they will stick to it. So that's quite limiting. But when you have limitations, you also have a lot of creative freedom, and you can use that to your advantage to tell a story. So anyway, I know this is an incredibly long-winded way of me basically saying, as a stills photographer, I really want to get better at framing things in a cinematic ratio. So my idea is I want to get a film back which will fit medium format roll film on this 5:4 camera. And what it will do is shoot a 1:2 ratio. Now, 1:2 ratio is maybe slightly odd in terms of cinema, but it's actually quite close to 16:9, the screen you're watching right now. It's that with just a little bit off the top and the bottom. And to me, it's a really pleasing ratio, so I'm really excited about playing around with that ratio. Now comes the sticking point and why I haven't done it so far, and that is because these backs are incredibly expensive. Even the AliExpress ones, you know, the cheapest of the cheap from China that's going to take 6 weeks to get here is £300 for a 6x12 back. And if you want to go to even wider, to a 6x17, I think you're looking around about £700. You know, I just can't afford that for such a niche thing. You know, it's just not that viable at the moment. So that got me to thinking, is there a way to 3D print this? I don't have a 3D printer, but I have a very good friend who does have a 3D printer, and he told me about a website called Thingiverse. Now, Thingiverse is like this hub of all this free to use 3D models that people just create and share. And someone, I will flag the name up on screen now, and I'll leave, of course, links to the page down below in the description. But someone has been so graciously kind to share a 3D printable 6x12 back for a large format camera. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video, is building it. Well, Jordie's going to be 3D printing it. I'm going to be building it, and then run some test rolls through it and just see how it looks. What, you know, can we actually get this cinematic style frame from a large format camera, and is it going to be my way in, my foot in the door to practicing and creating some really nice cinematic style shots on film. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the video, and let's head over to Jordie's house and see what he's been cooking up.
Hello, I'm Jordie. I like to 3D print. I like photography. I'm also a content creator online. I mainly stream to Twitch live through the handle Devious Jords, and mainly make a lot of content through YouTube, mainly gaming-based content, but some project hobby stuff as well. I first got into 3D printing, I think it was from Instagram that I first saw bits and pieces, and I was like, wow, you can just make stuff out of nothing, essentially. And I always liked the idea of having models from films or games, and just the love of that started it all off, and now it's become a staple part of my life, just having a 3D printer. So this one right here is such a random print, but I needed a way to put my tablet in front of me. I was looking online on Amazon, and like selling 10, 15, 20 quid for something like this, and it just made way more sense to look up to see if there are any prints for it, and lo and behold, there was a print for it. Because usually something like this, if I had to estimate, it would probably be about 2, 3, 4, 5 quid to in filament, and probably an energy cost to print.
So Jordie's already printed some parts for me already. This is going to be the part that actually holds the film in place. We're going to have the spools in here, so the 120 film is going to go inside these areas here, It's then going to wrap around this film plane here and go back through. The little hole is what's going to be visible from the back, and that's going to be to see the how far you've wound the film on. And as well as that, we've also got all these little bits here. Now we've got the winding knobs, we've got a smaller one for, I presume, probably the reverse if you want to wind the film back at all. We've got these little brackets here. These are going to be holding the film, and that's going to be in place. So where these little holes are at the bottom there, these are going to go up inside this housing, which is then going to hold the 120 film in place. So what we're going to be 3D printing today is actually the housing that's going to go on the back of this, and also Jordie will print in time the actual bit that fits on the back of the 5.4 large format camera. But yeah, so it's all looking good. But we can see how actually super solid. Considering these things are £300 to buy on AliExpress. Okay, admittedly from machined metal or whatnot, but the fact that we can create this for probably less than a tenner. Would you say less than a tenner?
Yeah, a lot less than a tenner. Like this, I'll say this cover that we're now about to print is £1.34.
Okay, so a lot less than a tenner, and that's one of the biggest pieces. So yeah, you can see why this 3D printing community is so active. The fact that you can make essentially anything you want is just incredible. So I'm super excited to see how this performs.
So this is the one of the parts for what you wanted printing, and I think this is just the cover for the back of it that would just attach to
Yeah, so that's essentially the back that's going to cover up the housing that actually holds the film in place.
Yeah, Carl gave me the actual link that it came from as well, which is from Thingiverse. It's one of the bigger sites to get these kind of prints from. This is Cura, Ultimaker Cura. I think a lot of people tend to use this. There's a few of them. I think there's a Prusa-based slicing tool. They call it a slicer in software slicer. And the reason is for that, I will just slice it here before we do any settings so you can see. But you can then see each of the layers as they go through the print. And if you haven't really seen 3D printing before, this is exactly what it does. So first layer, second layer, third layer, you see how it will continue to add to the final product layer by layer, and it's just plastic laying onto each of its layers.
And there's like little triangles.
Yeah.
That slowly rotate.
Yeah. So these ones here, this is infill. And this is one of the things that we will need to change. We'll have infill density right here, which I believe it said it was like 66%. Very specific of them. But you'll see that because I've increased the percentage of infill, there's hardly any gaps inside the actual print. What that essentially does is it just thickens everything up so it's stronger. And I think also to a certain extent, so there's no light leaks specifically for your case. I don't think there would be for black filament anyway, but I can imagine you want to try and prevent that from happening in any way that you can. So whenever you've got anything, so this will be I'll go up, there we go. So you'll see this is a 90-degree angle from going up and then having absolutely nothing underneath it. I have a setting on here which dictates when it would need support. You've got generate support here, and I set it to 65 because that's what my printer is capable of before it starts to looking a bit dodgy. As you can see with these, they're kind of like they're walls which are just like this. There's no infill or anything like that. And then as it rises to just before where the 90-degree angle comes, it then adds these cross hatchings which are easy to rip off of the print.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah.
And then the real print as such goes on top of that in that layer.
Yep.
And then
it adds as a table, essentially. It's just a table on top, just below it, so that it has something to print on. Preheat. Whilst that's heating up, I'm just going to quickly just grab stuff and move it. So this is a motor which essentially pushes in the filament. So when you start seeing the 3D printer go, you'll see that turning back and forth. And we've gone from this funky colour to a black. All right, and I know that the coverage for this print will be around this area. So I tend to just put like a little bit of Pritt stick on here. It's going to be like a controversial thing. Some people like it, some people don't.
Oh, what, the Pritt stick thing?
Pritt stick thing, yeah. People should. A lot of people say, well, you shouldn't have to. The settings speak for themselves. I've tried so many different settings for this printer to try to prevent it from lifting.
Controversial
and stuff.
Pritt sticking.
I know. And the thing is that the base of it is that I didn't spend a lot on the 3D printer. I've had to do upgrades and stuff for it. Like this is like purely an upgrade that.
Oh wait, and you 3D printed that, right?
I 3D printed this, so
the machines are making themselves.
Yeah, and I added these wheels underneath. I like added a load of like random different stuff. Even the legs that have squash balls in them, so that you get a bit of suspension, so that it's not rocking about too much, and it just kind of self-sustains itself. These are all just random upgrades, whereas if you paid like 500-600 quid, you don't need to do those, and you probably don't need Pritt stick either. But I need Pritt stick, and it's really enriched my life with with having Pritt stick. So starting in the actual filament, and then what this is a skirt. I essentially put this in as a way to determine, is the filament all right? I just give it a feel just to make sure the height is uniform all the way around the print. Some people use it as a windshield for the first layer, so no cold air goes to that first layer and screws up the print in some way. But the first layer is one of the most absolute important things for the print, because if you screw up the first layer, chances are the rest of the print is not going to look quite right. But as you can see for this, it's perfectly formed, it ain't coming off, and it's got like a nice thickness to it as well.
Well, I'm excited to say we've got all the bits back from Jordie now. You can see everything that's been 3D printed just here. Jordie was absolutely crucial in this whole process, in this whole project, because I realised that I'm kind of toting this as being I guess a way to save money and a way to not buy one of these like £300 backs. But you know, it's not lost on me the fact that this is only really true if you have a 3D printer or a very good friend with a 3D printer. So massive shout out to Jordie. All of his links for his socials and Twitch channel and everything are in the description below. So yeah, head on over there and give him a subscribe. So I guess to start things off, we should really just take note of what we have. We have these bits here. These are the 3D printed main sections. We also have in this little tray here, everything in here has also been 3D printed. We also have some third-party parts as such, which couldn't be 3D printed. We have this bit of plastic here, which is going to act as the roller for the film. We have an old dark slide, which doesn't have to be a dark slide, but I've got an old 5.7 dark slide kicking around and I'm never going to shoot 5.7, so might as well use the kind of official type of material. We've got some screws over here with some knurled nuts, some glue. This little red disc is going to go in the back here, and that's going to be to shade our film from the light. I guess just help the film not be exposed to light when you're winding it on and stuff. And a can. A can is we're gonna cut it down, and it's gonna act as a spring to apply pressure to the film as we're winding it round, just so the film actually stays tightly wound onto the spool. I think what we should do now is probably just go through each one of the pieces and kind of like just get a visual representation of what these bits are. I kind of appreciate that they are a bit of a jumbled mess of just objects and stuff like that. And I think the best way to describe this is, first of all, if we grab the large format camera. This is my MPP. It's the large format camera that I'm going to be using this particular back with. And while this isn't a video about large format photography, it's important that we just kind of understand the rough operations of how you actually shoot film in this thing. What we have on the back here is actually a spring-loaded back. And the usual 5.4 comes in these two-sided cassettes. So you would take your 5.4 cassette sort of thing, and you would slide it underneath the spring tension. And then of course the lens would be out and everything, but what you do is then remove your dark slide and take a photograph before putting the dark slide back in. Now this is a really handy method because it allows us to remove the cassette while not removing the back of the 5.4 camera, which is where you use to focus the photograph. So with that as the standard operation for 5.4, what we're doing is we're building a back very similar to this. Now this is a Graphics 6.7 back, and you can see that it's, I'll show it to the camera here, you can see that there's a 6.7 area on here, dark slide, film would be in there, and you can see this large plate which actually, with this particular camera, you can remove the ground glass completely, and you'll see that this then fits perfectly into the back of the camera, and we use these two sliding gates to attach it to the back of the camera. We then use it exactly the same operation as before, except from, of course, with it being a medium format 120 back, we have the roll film just like this, and we get, well, with this particular back we'll get 10 shots per roll. But in operation wise, it's exactly the same. You just remove the dark slide, take your photograph, put the dark slide back in, and then with this particular one you'd wind the film on. So with us now knowing how this particular back fits onto the large format camera, if I take this off and move this away, we can start to see some real similarities between the pieces that we already have. So this bit here and that bit there, they slot into each other. There's also a small gap been left here. We'll be using this dark slide here. We'll cut it down so this can go and act as the dark slide for this. This particular bit of the 3D print, this is very similar to this part here. And this part here is what holds the roll film. So we can see, very similar. This particular one has a lever, a bit like an SLR, whereas our one is going to have little knobs that we twist. But those two are basically very similar. This then fits into the back of the camera here, as does this. And then we have a shroud as well, which is basically the, I guess, the gate. And this will fit over the top, like that. And we will have essentially our 612 back that we can see here. We can see that all the dimensions that Jordie printed are absolutely spot on, and this slides in here perfectly. So this is what it will look like. Now we can't just immediately put this thing together. While many of the parts are incredibly well built in terms of their tolerances and slide together with absolute ease, like this, just so beautifully connected with each other. Other parts have been designed to be just a little bit too big, and that is because we need to fit and finish some of these parts. You'll notice that this little winding knob here, we have a square and we have the peg to go in it. They don't actually quite fit together. Now I don't know whether that's 100% by design or whether that's just maybe a slight error in the model that was made. But what it is going to mean that we're going to have to use some of these tools. Got a little file, got a saw to cut this plastic bit down. But we're just going to have to use some tools, got some sandpaper, just to fit and finish all these parts so they fit really snug together. And once they fit snug together, we're going to glue them together with just some super glue. Again, I asked Jordie the best thing to use. He said any type of plastic glue like that, but he uses super glue. So I'm going to stick with his advice for sure.
Well, it was in my childhood days, oh Lord, many long years ago. now with the Spirit, now of my Savior, I was filled, Lord filled, oh, in that old fashioned meeting, oh Lord, our memories, they linger still in that little, oh, that wooden church house out on a hill. You know, every Sunday morning, help me have the family prayer. Then to that old country wagon, all would feel, oh Lord, all would feel. Well, we start out on our journey, moving over rocks, God knows and real, to that little, oh, that wooden church house.
Right, so I've just got done with doing all the fitting and finishing of this 612 back, and it's actually a couple of days since the previous bit of this video. There was a little bit more work to do than I kind of anticipated, but I think it's only natural that you get these kind of like unexpected occurrences when doing a project like this. So yeah, I'm gonna go through kind of all the parts of the back, the bits I worked on, and also how it operates basically. So yeah, here it is. I mean, I'm so chuffed with it. First and foremost, the the kind of the build quality, the precision of nearly all of the parts, and how well it's all fit together really has kind of, I guess, kind of surprised me. I didn't. This is my first time ever working with a 3D printed anything, I guess, and the precision and sort of like how easy it was to work with has really surprised me, and also how strong it is. It doesn't feel flimsy. It feels really, really quite robust, and like it can sort of like take, you know, being in the backpack, being in a bag somewhere like that, being hauled around and sort of like not abused, but definitely withstand normal use, for example. So anyway, here's the back. You can see these two knurled nuts and these two screws. That's how we access the back. We can see on here, on the other side, we have the dark slide. If I remove this, this was made from the old 5.7 back, and I've just cut it down to fit inside. Again, really, really precise. If we take the back off, which is just done by these two little knurled nuts, off like that. So then we've separated into the two parts. So this is obviously the part that will go on the camera and contains the dark slide, and this is the part that contains the film. So we can take this apart further by pushing our two thumbs on the back here, and that will push out the film holder from the shroud or the backing for it. Looking on this side, we can see that that's the film plane. That's where the film is going to sit on top of. In the back we can see a couple of bits of tin can. Now these are to add tension as the film's being wound on, so it winds on nicely. And the way we access these is by pushing down on the spool, and these little L brackets come out. That will then allow us to take out the spool, like so, and exactly the same for the other side as well. Let's just have a quick look at the bits I had to work on. So firstly, these two little L brackets, these were the only parts that were really quite too big. They just, I had to do a lot of sanding down and a lot of filing in order to get them to actually slot into these little, I guess, little channels smoothly. And that was probably the biggest bit of work for the whole project. But apart from that, everything else was pretty smooth. These two advancing knobs on the top, I had to just sand down a little bit just to get them to fit together, but in all honesty, it's probably better to do that just so you've got that sort of flexibility and make it as tight and as secure as you want, rather than, you know, it being too loose and one of these falls off in your bag or when you're out in the field. So before we go out and do some test shots, I need to load a roll of film, I guess. And I'm going to do that inside inside the dark room. Well, not a dark room, just inside my dark room. Just so, yeah, I don't want to lose anything on my first time doing this. We'll be shooting some FOMA, cheap film, FOMA 100. I actually need somebody's scissors to get into this packet. Oh, that'll be right. So, pop out this little L bracket thing. There we go. Unwind this slightly. And insert it in the other side. Now it's important to get the orientation right when you're doing this. If you do it yourself, for example, you're going to want your backing paper, the black side, you're going to want that showing towards where the lens is going to be, and then the bright side of the paper, or the paper with the side of all the numbers on, you need that to be on the back, because that's where you're going to obviously see the numbers through the little window. So I'm just going to keep winding until I know that this take-up spool is nice and secure. There'll be a little arrow on here, a start arrow, but I'm going to close this up now because I don't know exactly where it should be on this camera. Not that it really makes a difference, because this is like the most basic roll film back you could get, because it's essentially just going from one side to the other, and we can also advance it both ways, which usually you can't. But anyway, that's on there. Pop this and make sure that's all secure. Now we'll open the little window. I'm going to start advancing until we start to see some numbers. Number 1. It was really sunny earlier, now it's completely overcast. Although, I guess that'll help if there's some light leaks on the back of this film cassette, film back. Oh man, that 612 looks so cool. It's like so cinematic, because it's basically a 16:9, like you're used to seeing like this video right now, but it's just got the top and bottom just trimmed off ever so slightly. Ah, so cool. Right, so what I'm going to do now is focus up and yeah, compose it. I'm excited. Right, so we've got a composition set up. It's nothing crazy special, but it will definitely do for this situation. So what we want to do now, close the focusing screen. There you go, I made a little cutout for the 612. It's not that great, but it'll do for now. Okay, and put the 612 back on. So that's all secured. Make sure that the lens is closed, and all important, take a meter reading. So we have 100 speed film. I'm going to go 1 second at f18. So 16 to 22 should be about there. Okay, let's just test that. Yep. Okay, cool. Jealous you guys get to see this before me. Everything done. We're focused. We're set up. We've got a second exposure. Okay, and we already wound on the film. So I'm going to pull this out. Ooh. Oh, okay. There's the two little arrows. The film is open. Okay. And close this up. And number 4. Okay. I'm going to do a second exposure at the lowest aperture I can, so like around f4, because I want to see just how in focus it actually is, because one of the things about these 3D prints is, I guess it's made of plastic. So I'm a little bit worried that there's a little bit of like flexibility in the film plane, which might cause the film, you only need to be a little bit off, like, and I'm talking like fraction of a millimeter, in order for it to actually be out of focus. So, right, light meter again. Oh, and it's starting to rain. Wonderful. 4.5 will be 15th of a second. We can do that. We've got 4.7, so I'll do 1/8 of a second just to overexpose it. Okay, we wound the film on, pulled it out to there. 4.7. Cool. It's really starting to rain actually. Okay, I'm going to get this packed up, put it back in the bag, and we'll try and find another location, try and get out the rain. Oh man, let's wind it on. Let's wind it on because I'll forget and double expose that. Yeah, I was right. The heavens just opened up a bit. I don't think there's an amazing photo opportunity from this hut that the people who clay pigeon shoot use, but I don't want to get my large format camera wet, so we're going to take a shot looking into the woods and yeah, see how that turns out. It's not the worst in the world. There's this tiny little birch tree just there. Ah, it'll be alright. Rain is still coming down, so I'm just going to quickly reposition this camera, try and get a couple of shots off with quicker shutter speeds, and yeah, just so I can kind of see whether the back is working operationally as it should anyway. Okay, I guess we've got a few things to talk about, right? I realized that I'd made a mistake in terms of the lens that I was using, and that is because I was using this old Polaroid lens, which it's an old press photography lens, and it has a self-cocking shutter. So you can see or hear, you actually, rather than cocking the shutter and then firing it, This one is like a double action thing where you push down, it builds the spring tension, then it kind of jolts a little bit every time the shutter is pressed in. So I was kind of shooting what they were like second long exposures, and yeah, that was kind of totally my bad and should not have really used that. But looking at these first images, we can see on here they're actually not too bad. Considering that I was shooting with a second long exposure, these are actually way sharper than I thought they were going to be after I'd realized that, this issue. Looking at the second one where I shot at a lower aperture, see the difference here. This was the f/18 one, and this was the one wide open. I was focusing on this telegraph pole here. So moving on to this one, this was like the one I realized straight off the bat that the lens had definitely moved while I took the photo. I tried with a second shot, and this one isn't too bad actually. Again, it came out way better than I thought, but still, if you're doing tests, trying to test the focus and how sharp things are, you can't have these kind of things going on, like shaking lenses and stuff. And these were the last two that I took. And these were really just to try and get a shutter speed to a high enough amount, and this is crazy, but yeah, this one is the maximum shutter speed is 1/25 of a second, which is really low. But I thought, well, if there was any shake occurring from the lens movement itself, hopefully this would freeze it. But of course, these weren't really going to do, so I had to go out and shoot another bunch of test shots. This time I loaded up some Ilford Pan F50, which is quite sharp. So Pan F50 is a lovely film. And these were the images that come from it. So here's the first shot. And you can see with using a shutter release cable, we were able to completely negate any sort of lens shake, anything like that. So these images are pretty nice, and I'll just go through them now. But I noticed something from these photographs which was a slight cause for concern, and that was to do with the focus. Now, with a large format camera, as described in the start of the video, the way you focus a large format camera is by actually focusing on the ground glass, and then you remove that ground glass, and then you put on the back. Now, you're relying on the ground glass and the film plane of the back to be in exactly the same position. Otherwise, you're going to get a slight misalignment. And I noticed through these shots, this is what was happening here. So with this tire shot in particular, I focused on the tire, on the ground glass, and in the ground glass, it was nice and sharp. But you can see it's actually focused on the ripples in the water that I chucked a stick in. And I wasn't really anticipating this. But what it meant was there was a slight difference in the distance from the ground glass to the distance where the film sits when I take photographs. And the more I look through these photos, you can see the exact same thing. Again, another shot of the tire. A little bit more in focus this time, but still, the sharpness is definitely on the water in front of it. Same here with this shot. If we zoom in, we can see that the focus is really dropped off in the middle of the frame, and it starts to get sharper the closer we get towards the camera. Again, exactly the same story. I focus probably on these bits here, and it's starting to focus more down towards the front here. So that got me to thinking, how am I going to compensate for this? Now, of course, you could adjust the film back so it sits where the glass is. You could adjust the glass to sit where the film back is, which isn't a great solution, because what you're going to do at that point is actually throw off where your glass sits for all of the other ways to shoot film, so with the normal cassettes and everything. So firstly, I needed to figure out just how much my back was off, and I used a little depth gauge, and I measured from the lens board to the film plane, and then the same for the glass, and it was about 1 millimeter off. Once I averaged out the four corners, it was about 1 millimeter. So I actually got an old like metal workshop ruler and just sanded it down and fit it inside there's a little like channel on the side of these large format cameras where you can put different focusing scales and stuff. And what I've basically done is just inserted a ruler into that So what I do is just focus on the ground glass, put my 612 back on, and then I just adjust the focus and I bring the focus 1mm closer, which compensates for that difference between the glass and the film back, which led me to another test roll. So this will be my third test roll. We have a look at the first shot. The first shot's was it this one? The first shot is focused on the glass, and the second shot is the compensated by 1mm. So I focused on here, and then my second shot was on here. So you can see it's a little bit sharper. Then if we move to this one, I focused on this fence post, and you can see it's actually not that terribly out of focus, but once I compensated for the millimeters difference, you can see this was the shot here, so it's a lot sharper. And then finally, I took a picture of this birch tree. This was the first shot, and we can see, if we zoom in, this is at like 100%, you can see this is quite soft, but once we compensated for the millimeter, you can see it's much, much sharper. So yeah, that's basically it. That's going to be my method moving forward, working with this 3D printed back. It's not 100% ideal, but just compensating a millimeter for each shot really, really isn't that much of an effort. So yeah, I guess we can say this is like mission accomplished. And if you have access to a 3D printer, or you have a friend, if you have a Jordie with a 3D printer, try out for yourself. It's a really, really economical way to get into panoramic medium format photography. And I think with a 5.4 camera, you can even get a 6:17 back, which extends from the back of the camera itself. And rather than be 6x12, it will be a 6x17, which would be even more cinematic, whatnot, you know. Now, speaking of 6:17 cameras, I've got a little bonus for anyone who's made it this far into the video, and that is because I've got a mate called Neil, and Neil has been 3D printing an entire camera that he's built himself in Blender, and he's got it to the point now where it's basically like just spot on. He's 3D printed multiple backs for it, so he can carry black and white film and color film or different speeds, and it really is just something of just 3D engineering brilliance. So he's been kind enough to say that we can head out with him and have a look at this camera and see how it works, and really see the next step of 3D printing cameras. Rather than just making the back, you know, we can go as far as making the whole thing itself. So yeah, let's go check that out.
I've already got grass inside the film back. That's good. Good start. This is where I can't get it in there. That don't feel right. Well, under we go! Oh, there we are. I'm absolutely miles away from the tree. But that'd be a good test. Want to go slightly pan F, so 50 ISO. Everything's just so bright, so now we can take this off. And we're good to go. That out. Done.
There we go.
Just wind that on. And there I am. One.
So the camera is built around the main body here. I guess you could consider this the camera. On the back we can attach the ground glass. That's what you use to focus. And then each lens is connected using a different sized cone rather than bellows. course, then the ground glass can be taken off and the film back put back on, and you're ready to take shots. Neil has 4 lenses for this. He has a 90, a 120, a 150, and a 210. The back is held on by these little clips here that he's designed, and each lens has its own helicoid, it's called, and that's to focus the lens. And then of course we have the little back, and he's also even gone to the lengths of adding springs to the back of the film plane to add tension. And there's 4 of these, so there's just like a nice smooth operation. And on that day when we took some shots, we tested out the different focal lengths. Here's the 90, here was the 120, this was the 150, and then the 210 as well, so varying focal lengths. So those last 4 shots kind of represent the final product of the camera. That's once all the fine tuning has been done, and Neil has done multiple prints of the cones for the lenses and also the backs, you know, with the spring tension and all that kind of stuff. And these shots here represent some of the first shots that he took, actually, which are still amazing looking shots, but he's actually managed to, you know, really get it and fine tune it to the camera it is today. So it's awesome work, man. But to see just how far you can take 3D printing as a concept when it comes to creating cameras and creating equipment really is just outstanding, and I guess the sky really is the limit with this kind of stuff. So yeah, I encourage anyone who can to delve deeper, I guess. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the process of me making this back, and I'll look forward to actually using the back and making some really cool photos in an upcoming video in the future. So stick around for that. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.